On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk what is an integrator, Dish loses a patent lawsuit, and buddy checks. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
This is ResiWeek, episode 372, Create a Loop. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Steve Greenblatt. He's the CEO of Control Concepts. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here, buddy. It's been too long. Then we have my good friend, Mr. Joe Whitaker. He is the Vice President of Business Development for Origin Acoustics. How you doing, Joseph?
Doing well. Glad to be back on the show.
Glad you guys are both here. All right, gentlemen, let's kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro and a good friend of the show, Mr. Jason Knott. What is an integrator? All of us have been asked this question. Whack Lighting and Aspire creates an unbranded video with integrators to explain to prospective customers exactly what it is that CE Pros do. If you don't know Whack Lighting, they are one of the biggest players in the lighting game, not in necessarily just in our industry, but in the actual lighting game, which is the one, if you're going to play in lighting, you need to pay attention to. Aspire is their AV focus line, just as a little bit of backstory. But so they pulled a bunch of integrators together to create this that you can slap your marketing on and use as a customer facing kind of promotional piece. Steve, let me start with you on this, especially because your section of our industry is even, I'd argue, a little bit harder to explain to a lot of end users. How do you go about developing that pitch? Because as great as this video is, and a lot of us are either using this or going to use this, you can't always get in front of that customer and pull up like your iPad and go like, well, watch this video, you'll understand what we do. How do you go about developing a concise elevator pitch to give to prospective clients, to put on your website, to put in your Twitter bio?
So something like this, I think, is more marketing and educational and informative to be able to really set the tone and be able to plant those seeds, so that sometimes when you're trying to promote yourself, you need to promote the community or others like you, so that you're warming up the prospective clients to the idea that you may not work with me, but you need to work with somebody who meets certain requirements and has certain qualifications, and this is somebody, an integrator is somebody that you need to know if you're trying to put disparate pieces of equipment together, or somebody that is going to be your point of contact, or kind of your general contractor, if you will, for your AV and lighting project, whatever, your smart home project, whatever that might be. And for us, in more of the software side, we always have to try to sell the community on the value of programming, and then you need to go one step further and say, what is the value of what is the role a programmer does on a project, and then also why would you want to work with a programming company versus have a programmer that may be in-house. And all of that, though, is really important, because if you try to, we're all a bunch of small companies, so we need to really team up on something like this to get critical mass, and because if we're all singing the same song and we're all saying that understanding what an integrator is and going out and finding one that could help you with your needs is important, it's only going to open the doors for business for everybody. And then it won't be looked at more so as being self-serving, but something that's going to really lay the groundwork for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, that's really good. Joseph, you and I we've talked about this ad nauseum, but we do so many things. Like your typical integrator, whether it's residential or commercial, very few operate in a specifically niche market. Most operate quite broadly, doing a wide variety of things. If you're a whack dealer or an Aspire dealer, obviously you're into lighting. If you're into, landscape irrigation automation, like there are so many different things that integrators do. How do you go about not being considered the jack of all trades, but actually fully encompassing the wide variety of things that integrators are doing these days?
I always put it back to, it depends on the day of the week and what projects we're on. Because like you said, I mean, Matt, I think we were on a committee at CEDIA together, trying to figure out, what we're going to call, and, being involved in that for so long, we went from electronic systems contractors over to, smart home pros to whatever else we called ourselves along the way, before integrator kind of stuck. But
Eskies.
Yeah, exactly. We were home technology professional, technologist. The list goes on and on. So, but the elevator pitch, that's the hard part, because we've kind of come into a maturity of the industry where not every company does the same thing. Not every company does all the different levels of what we do. Steve gave a great example when it's, software only, programming only. Then you have the all-in-one house. You got, the companies out there that just hang TVs and put in Sonos. It becomes really hard to get that elevator pitch down. It's one of the reasons why I actually always liked home technology professional. I kind of always liked that one because it kind of comprised everything we do. Because not everyone in our industry integrates, is a good way to put it. We've got guys out there that'll just put up some Lutron shades, some Sonos, and call it a day and move on. And they've got great, amazing, successful businesses with kind of that. But, the elevator pitch I always think of is more about who you're talking to, right? Because we service luxury markets, mid-market, MDUs, whatever the case is. You've got to have what you do down to a science to explain it to, because everyone you're going to talk to is going to be different, right? You've got to, I'm a residential audio specialist, or I am a home theater specialist, or here's, basically my Sharpie card of the things that we can do for you. More on the side of what can be provided to the customer versus what I actually do. Because customers don't care what I actually do. They want to know what I will do for them. So and that's where I think integrators need to start looking at their elevator pitch, is to take away the fact that I'm the smartest guy in my city when it comes to this, or whatever the case may be, or I know all these things. They don't care. The elevator pitch needs to be what services, what things they can offer the client. If they can get that down to, a 10-second, 30-second pitch, here's what I can do for you, I think the discussion would be over. Nobody cares if we're HTPs, integrators, or whatever. They want to know what we can do for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, gentlemen, let's move to our next topic of the day. This comes to us from Reuters. Dish has been hit with a $469 million verdict over commercial skipping technology. You're probably sitting there going, why do we care? And let me tell you. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. What makes this very interesting is, one, the amount that's involved from the infringing on 2 patents that ClearPlay had relating to filtering material from streaming video. But 2 is the fact that, well, they found that this violated ClearPlay's patent rights. They rejected that they copied the technology intentionally, which is an interesting aspect of this. Joe, this didn't get a lot of play in our media from the AV side, but this is a fairly big deal. Again, partially due to the size of the verdict, but secondly, because somebody actually won a patent challenge in the AV space. What does this mean for Dish? But what do you see this doing going forward?
I think, man, I think so many things about this one, because not just in our industry, but overall, this should be an eye opener for everybody. This is a David and Goliath story. You know, I don't care what anybody says. Dish is one of the biggest out there, right? They have massive amounts of revenue, money, just money, period, not just revenue, but money. They are lawyered up like no other. This is, you know, you take those top big ones out there, AT&T, Dish, Lutron, Sonos. These are guys that they could lawyer you to death and drag lawsuits out to the point that you spend more on your own legal than the lawsuit would pay out. So this is one of those stories where if you look at, you know, the USPTO and things going on there, and I don't know if anybody knows this, in the last 5 years, there have been a lot of changes with the way the USPTO works, all the way down to how patents are filed, how they're claimed, the entire thing. The little guy is important again, right? Because we haven't seen a win like this in quite a long time. I mean, look at this exact lawsuit. If this was a mentality of the courts for intellectual property and also the USPTO, when Lutron sued, the list is forever. Crestron, Control4, everybody. Yep. Now look at how that would have worked, because there was IP on the other people's side too. So I think everyone should be paying attention to now, because Matt, you know, you could walk through Expo last year or this next year, and you could walk, 100 feet and go, that's a patent violation. That's a patent violation. That's a patent violation.
Oh yeah.
And just see them repetitively. So now, this is one of those advice things of me, now being in a manufacturer's seat of, if you think you are infringing, you need to start taking a look at what you're doing. Because I think this is going to be one of those things where everybody goes, oh, wow, wait, I'm a little bitty company, but I can actually defend my stuff against these big gorillas now. I need to start getting on this. So that's the big eye opener to me. If you're going to win something against somebody like Dish, that owns like 70% of the gray band out there, like they're a mammoth, and they lost. I would be interested though to find out that 100 some odd million, if that's going to be like a royalty payout or how that actually work, how they came up with that number. But this, in our industry, this is a big deal. The little guys can win.
Yeah, the 469 million is fairly massive. Steve, you and I have talked in the past about, and specifically more in the professional side, there are some companies out there that, and I'm not naming them, nice try, that we would consider patent trolls. They buy patents and they work in the space, and you're thinking of them right now. But they literally they innovate by litigation. That's what they bring to the table. They sit on their patents and then they sue people that come up with something similar. But typically, kind of to Joe's point, you very rarely see something go to the point of a verdict. You see a lot of infringements and then agreements with royalties being paid. We've seen that in some of the examples that Joe was alluding to. We don't see a lot of patent infringement cases, even in our space, that go all the way through to a verdict with a fiscal penalty that is not somehow roped into a royalty situation. Do you think that this is going to open the door for more companies in our space to get a little bit more litigious?
If they can win, yes. but I mean that's the whole point, is that, you know, what Joe was saying is that, you know, this leaves hope for the little guy, but they must have had a really good case, because to his point, and that you know, no matter if you're right or wrong, if you're going to if it's going to cost you more money than it's worth, it's very hard to really look at that as a good business decision.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where this gets to be very difficult. I'd have to imagine that this was a lot more clear cut, and they had a good confidence level that they were going to be found the winner of this case, and that they were going to get paid. Otherwise, I could see something like this going down a road could be very detrimental to a business, even if you feel like you're right. If you can't win, it can really take you down. So I would say it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. It's how many Goliaths have been sued, and there's been a lot. And
there has been a lot,
especially, and like I'm thinking specifically of the Sonos and the Google suit.
Oh, yeah. That one.
Yeah, like
that was a multi-tiered one.
So Hios sued Sonos, which was again little guy going up against big guy,
mm-hmm.
and then when Sonos sued Google for their pod thing, that was just a bigger version of
the same thing. Yeah.
David going up against Goliath. It's a little nuts. All right, let's change topics again, because I'll play in the legal space for quite a while. This comes to us from Residential Systems and a good friend of the show, Mr. Henry Clifford, who was on last week. Buddy check for the win. As always, go read through Henry's article. He recounts growing up and being in a scout camp and having essentially a buddy board where you had a swim buddy. So when you jumped in the pool, you had to have a swim buddy to make sure you stayed safe. Henry pulls this into using a buddy check to work within your business and go through a couple of outlined checkpoints where people within your company can check with one another to make sure that, you know, a specific project is still on track. In the pre-show, we were talking about how, you know, I use this in my company, but I also use this from as an outboard. And I've reached out to Steve, I've reached out to Joe, and a variety of other people, and people have reached out to me to go over things real quick and just be like, hey, are we on the right track? Steve, is this something that is unknown for most companies, especially for most smaller companies, the concept of internal checks and balances within a project as it's going?
I think it speaks a lot to a company's culture. I think that if it's a very much a top-down leadership, or there's certain members of a team or certain roles are elevated as being more important than others, then that collaboration is probably less frequent, less accepted. A lot of times, if you think about it, a technician installing a system may have all the greatest ideas because they're the ones that are talking to the client, and they're the ones that are right in front of the equipment, and they're seeing opportunities for improvement. But if they're not encouraged to go share that with other people, and if that does not come back around to the sales department, let's say, in some businesses they may not even know each other, and in others they may be in a barrier between that type of communication. So it really does depend on a company's culture and the way that they empower people to be able to provide insight and bring ideas to the table and be collaborative. And for me, I mean, this is a great article, and this is an amazing idea. and we all talk about doing a debrief after a project, and a lot of times you talk about that when something doesn't go well, but how often do you do it when it does go well? Because you can learn a lot from that as well. And I think that there's a stigma associated with that, and we all need to be able to be less, check our ego and be open to feedback and be open to continual improvement. And something like this, I think, is really critical for small businesses, and especially for teams, because when it comes down to it, all the parties of a project, they can't exist without the others. And so if we make sure that we're creating a loop and giving everybody the opportunity to look at how we can be better and what we can learn from an experience, that has to be a win and provide really measurable value to a company.
Really wish that every time I said I was going to do an after action, I actually did. Because we just move on to the next project, because that's how life works.
Either that or something so bad that then you do it. But
you don't.
You need to do it consistently.
Or it's so bad that you don't want to do it, and you don't want to go back and relive that pain.
Agreed.
Which never happens to us, does it, Steve? We never do that. Joseph, I'm glad that Steve brought up ego, because I think that is the...
Why are you pointing this one at me?
No. I'm not
joking.
Hey, if it fits, man. So I have this running joke that I like to tell people, that I'm the smartest guy in the room, because it makes people do the like, whoa, he's a condescending punk. But I like to say that a lot because it gets a really good reaction out of people, but it allows me to, when questioned, explain why. And I am never actually the smartest person in the room, but typically I know enough smart people in enough smart areas that if you ask me a question about something, I know someone I can call to get that answer. And I view it as the side of, I'm well aware that I know people that are way smarter than me, and I'm going to heavily lean on them as much as possible, which is why I call Steve all the time. Is it something where most integrators and most integration firms, A, they're a little bit smaller, but B, that owner, that main person in that firm has done the I'm the smartest guy all the time, right? I don't hire people smarter than me. There's nobody smarter than me in my company. So I don't have anyone to check on, to double check things, to bounce something off of. How much does ego play into the inability of a lot of us to actually implement a system like this?
A lot. Oh my God, a lot. So, where, what I do at my current job, and you kind of know the makeup of my old company. You've met a handful of people that were there, and I've always lived by if I am the smartest person in the room, I am not in the right room. Because at the end of the day, all I'm going to be left with is the mistakes I would have made on my own anyways, when I could have surrounded myself by people who are much smarter than me in other areas. I'm happy to stay in my lane. That you can't grow like that. And the flip side of that is, you talk about that attitude in any organization. The resentment it causes creates silos that slows the business down. That's just the nature of thing, is it'll start putting up walls. Everybody gets into silos, and now things are not moving the way they should. There's a lot of great bad examples of this in our industry. And one of the most typical places you find this is in integration firms that also have a retail outlet, right? So you have standard retail, and then you have the custom side of it. And those two don't fit well together. Naturally, they don't. But the customer coming off the street, building a new house, goes to the retail center first, talks to the retail salesman. The retail salesman scratches all on down a paper, sends it to custom. And the guy over there in custom looks at it and goes, none of this is going to work. It's because it's a silo. right? They created a silo. And a lot of times that happens because of the people up at the top, like you're just discussing, Matt. I know better than everyone, so just do it my way. You lose all the ability to speed up processes, increase logistics. All of those things that could happen are broken because of egos creating silos. So you're 100% right. And I think me and you, Matt, and Steve probably does too. We probably know those same guys. There are those out there that they could be much better, much more efficient. They just check themselves at the door and realize there's a reason why they have the team. The team is to bring everybody up together, right? That's why I've always thought that Henry, good old buddy Opal, is a perfect example of how to do it the other way. The dude is highly educated, great business owner. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but he takes all that feedback from employees, customers, all of that stuff, meshes them together, and lets those guys kind of build the in-betweens, which is why this article was so good. I love the buddy system idea.
Yeah, it's genius. And if you want a list of those people, just send me a DM. I'll hit you up so you know who you're talking to. Because I might know a couple.
I know.
Heck, I know more than a couple. Gosh, the list is long. But I keep one, so yeah. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Joe, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Origin Acoustics, where can they do that?
They can always find me on the socials at Joe Whitaker, or you can always directly email me. I love those, joe@originacoustics.com. And they can, of course, find us at originacoustics.com. But if you're a dealer, you're probably going to go to originacoustics.net. If you're a dealer, go to that. There's some new stuff on there. There's some new tools and forums to kind of make life a little easier for you.
I love it. Steve, my good friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Control Concepts, where can they do that?
For me, you can reach me on social at Steve Greenblatt. My company can be reached at controlconcepts.net. And as Uncle Richie, my partner at the State of Control, says, make sure you come to AVNation.tv to check out our control and automation podcast. So we'd like to have more people as guests and hear the feedback that on the shows that we're doing. And you always get to hear a good rant from Rich. So please check that out.
And don't downplay the Ask the Programmer as well. That's another really good show you do.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. I do have
that's James King, right?
Yes, do a podcast with James King called Ask the Programmer, and that's a nice compliment to a State of Control weekly show. Thank you.
You're welcome. I got you. Don't worry. I'll plug stuff for you. Thanks again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and most other social platforms. But more importantly, please visit avnation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.